This is the Pharmaverse podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pietrack, engaging leaders from the pharma universe. Hello and welcome to the Pharmaverse podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pietrack. And if you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the pharmaceutical industry, you are in the right place because we interview the brightest stars from all different corners of the pharma universe. And today's guest would certainly fit that description. We're joined by the Chief Business Officer and one of the founders of Libra Therapeutics, Isaac Veinbergs, PhD. Libra Therapeutics is a San Diego-based biotech in the neurodegenerative space, and Isaac has such an interesting story, rich with leadership and career development insights. So, Isaac, welcome to the Pharmaverse.
Michael, thank you very much for having me here.
I'm so excited to talk with you about Libra Therapeutics, about fundraising, about career development, and about leadership. But let's start with Libra. Tell us about what you guys are developing there.
Thank you for the opportunity. So, Libra Therapeutics is a biotech company focusing on the development and discovery of therapeutics for neurological diseases. We're working on therapeutics that are focused on a mechanism called autophagy, which is the cellular function that clears out accumulated proteins or waste within a cell and organelles that are being broken down and eventually recycles them for proper functioning of cells. Neurodegeneration is characterized by accumulation of proteins that eventually lead to neurotoxicity and synaptic toxicity that may lead to many things like motoric dysfunction or cognitive dysfunction. And those are always caused by one of two things, either overproduction of these proteins that accumulate or the inability to clear them out. So autophagy, which is what we're working on, is the mechanism to create balance by taking away those accumulated proteins. So we're working on a novel target called TRPML1, which is an ion channel within the cell, and it's responsible for kicking off and accelerating that process of clearing out those aggregating or toxic proteins.
So that really the nuance and the difference of the approach is the autophagy part of it?
I'd say there's two or multiple levels of differentiation. Number one is the approach of autophagy, which people have tried to harness kind of that mechanism to clear out proteins. And the other thing is we're working on very novel chemical matter that differentiates from some of our competitors or some of the work that's been done previous to Libra being founded. And we think that the properties of those chemical entities are unique and offer these properties that could kickstart that autophagy process.
Sounds really cool. If someone were to want to check out the pipeline or take a look at where you guys are in process, what's the
It's libratx.com, and we'd be happy to address questions. And there's a link on info, and we try to be really good about getting back to people with questions and answers for them.
That sounds great. So what is the next big milestone for you guys?
So that's a great question. So currently we're embarking on what's called GLP toxicology studies, which are the first level of studies that are required by the FDA prior to starting phase one patient or healthy volunteer studies. So right now we're wrapping those up. We should be done with those at the beginning of the second quarter. And we're also doing some very important proof of concept studies in some animal models of neurological disease. And bringing those two together will put us in a position where we could raise our Series B financing or look for a transaction of the company, either a licensing type deal or an M&A event.
Got it. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on Libra. Wishing you guys great success
Thank you very much.
I want to transition topics just a little bit because your career story is so cool. I want the people to understand it. And a lot of the folks that are our listeners, over 55% of our listeners, categorize themselves as aspiring leaders. And your career has been marked by big pivot points that can really help these individuals. So which pivot points brought you the biggest career advancement opportunities?
There's a few of those that I could point to in my career. I think the first is when I was getting my PhD, I was kind of at the crossroads of going either into kind of the pharma biotech route or going into the academic science route. And I always felt that the science in the academic field was probably a little bit too slow for me in being able to develop therapeutics for patients. A lot of my passion comes from having two grandparents with dementia and really wanting to make an impact in patients' lives as well as the caregivers' lives. So I remember growing up with my mother as the primary caregiver for my grandmother and seeing everything that she went through. And that happened at a very critical time during my upbringing. So for me, my mission is to try to come up with therapeutic alternatives that help out these patients, caregivers, families, and society.
So let me
Sorry.
stop you there because I want to ask you a question. So when you decided to move into biotech from being just a researcher or something like that, did you get pushback from those people around you?
I'd say that the academic community is very focused on keeping the people it trains within the academic community. And I'd say that the main objective of these professors is to train great scientists that could take kind of the path moving forward and develop novel biologies, understand kind of causes of disease, and a little bit less focused on developing therapeutics, which is what biotech and the pharma industry does a little bit better. And at the time, I was considered a sellout. I was considered someone going over to the dark side, or at least the thinking was primarily motivated by the money rather than the altruistic kind of scientific endeavors.
A lot of people have similar sentiments. They had to deal with the same thing, but they stayed true to what they saw for themselves. And what other pivot points were big in your career?
Yeah, I'd say that transitioning from the scientist to corporate development or operations side, I was at a nice place in my career where I could continue on as a purely drug hunter, scientist, leading programs into the clinic. But I had the opportunity to start working on potential licensing activities. So while I was working at Amgen, I had the opportunity to triage and look at opportunities that could have been in licensing opportunities and really understanding how to do due diligence, how to identify these opportunities. And I really enjoyed that. I really like bringing my scientific expertise and kind of bringing in the business acumen that I always thought I was pretty good at, but never formally trained as. And eventually got the opportunity at Sanofi Genzyme to lead the business development unit for the CNS therapeutic area and really bring in some of the business aspects as well as the scientific aspects to fill some strategic needs for the company. So I'd say that's another one.
Yeah, well, tell us that story because that's a really cool story. When you were like the interim head of BD, that really propelled your career. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so an interesting time in my career while I was at Sanofi, I was heading up the external innovation group for neurosciences, which is the group that's responsible for the scientific evaluation of in-licensing opportunities. And we happened to lose the head of business development for the therapeutic area in middle of a transaction. So I went to my boss and I said, hey, if we're not able to kind of fill in these gaps, we're going to lose this opportunity. And it was a very high value opportunity, one that had a lot of scientific um, potential. It also fit a really nice spot within our portfolio at Sanofi. And my boss at the time gave me the opportunity and he said, I don't think you have the skills to do the job, but someone's got to do it. So I'll put you in a position where, and I'll say it a little bit to the extreme, where you could fail if it doesn't work. But he had the confidence in me and we made the transaction go through at the time. I think it was the biggest transaction or licensing transaction for the company at the time. And after that, I got to keep the job, did that for a few years before moving on to my next opportunity.
I love that story because what that individual said to you could have either demoralized you or could have inspired you to do a great job, but I think getting that opportunity is something that a lot of people may not ever get in their career. But sometimes when there is someone who exits, that creates an opportunity for you if you're just brave enough to seize it.
That's exactly it. I think that in our careers, there are opportunities that we have to identify and we have to jump on top of, right? A lot of the times we see these opportunities kind of pass us by because we don't recognize that either we have the ability to do it or we don't value ourselves enough. And also, it's really important to be within an organization where the leadership there recognizes the potential. And I think that a little bit of the pushback that I received was more to motivate me and to get me a little bit more aggressive in doing these things. Because at the end of the day, if they didn't think I was capable of it, they wouldn't have given me that opportunity. and it all worked out for the best.
Well, it's such an interesting thing. I mean, because you look at your career, and about half of it is in R&D, and then about half of it is in business development, where you're the scientific expert of the team evaluating the science. And I work with a lot of MSLs that are looking for what is going to be the next step in their career. And all of them would love to transition to the BD side where they can evaluate the science, but they don't have a deal sheet. And it's sort of like this chicken and the egg thing. What advice can you give to them?
I'd say that the easiest way to transition into BD, if you're a scientist, is through the external innovation or search and evaluation function within biotechs or the pharmaceutical industry. I'd say that the business acumen or the financial background is something that you don't need to evaluate the true scientific merits of programs. It's basically understanding the biology, understanding the fit within the portfolio that you're looking to fill gaps in, and understand what the drug discovery process is to be able to recognize what risks and opportunities they are for those partnering kind of programs or packages. So I think that once you start understanding how to um, evaluate an opportunity, how to make it fit, how to communicate, the business pieces start falling into place. You start interacting with people from the finance side, from the commercial side, from the development side, and you really kind of create the story to pitch to management of why this is something that should be in our portfolio. And through multiple iterations of that, you start picking up on the business aspects. You start interacting with transaction people and understanding what deal terms are important and also how to review contracts. So I think all these things come together, and you could start with being kind of the scientific voice and kind of evolving yourself and learning on your own, doing a lot of kind of internet searches and online courses around how to evaluate companies, how to give them a valuation, how to do an MPV, and how to really communicate things forward, right? But I think the communication piece is key. It's how do you translate kind of the scientific merits, the scientific evaluation into business terms, and how can you communicate across the organization? Because you'll have people in different functions that are not all at the same level scientifically. So you have to break it down into components which every function can understand. So I think that's also something that you could get by evaluating more and more opportunities.
Interesting. We've had a few other people that were founders that started off in business development, and they thought the company should really look into a certain asset. And the company just said no. And they said, well, then screw it. I'm going to get, gain money. I'm going to gain funding, and we're going to buy it and start a company. Have you had an experience where you really thought an asset would be great in the portfolio and it was kind of shot down?
All the time. I'd say there's many reasons why deals don't make it across the finish line. They could be part of a negotiation. It could be identifying potential scientific risks that the in-licensing company may not want to take. So basically alignment of risk and reward benefits. And sometimes the science is super novel, super exciting, but super early, right? So it's all about timing as well. And many things have to line up for a deal to get across the finish line. And I would say that I've gotten deals across the finish line that I wasn't so excited about, but had a very good fit within the portfolio. But then the opposite of super cool science that just isn't able to advance. And it's one of my frustrations, but I think it's just par for the course. It's something that happens, and you have to be at the right place at the right time for these opportunities.
Interesting. I'd love to be a fly on the wall on some of these conversations. This episode is brought to you by K. Bassman International, the leader in pharma and biotech recruiting. When pharma executives need to make critical hires, they go to the experts at K. Bassman, pharma's one-source staffing solution. Visit kbic.com. Now back to the episode. I want to transition a little bit. One of the reasons I wanted to talk with you is because of your fundraising background. Anyone that's looking at the pharmaceutical industry and what's been going on over the last 36 months, it's been hard. And the fundraising landscape looks like it dynamically shifted. What does it look like these days?
It remains very tough. I'd say that following JP Morgan, which is the largest healthcare investing and partnering event, took place in January. And although there's a little bit of optimism kind of in the air and people talking about things getting better, it's really tough out there. I think it just takes a little bit of time between the optimism and when things actually start solidifying and becoming a beneficial time to look for funding. Um, we're right about to commence our fundraising process, and we've been talking to a lot of investors, starting to kind of get the waters warm for us to kind of jump in and really do the formal process. But what's happening is we're sensing a lot of people are really hesitant. We're seeing a lot of very good companies not get the financing that they require. And it's just a bloodbath out there right now. So hopefully within the next few months, things start kind of warming up, things start improving, and we'll be in a better position. But it's a sentiment that you could talk to almost anybody that's going through the fundraising or even the investing side, and it's tough out there. I would say that the VCs out there, the investors, are still investing. A lot more of the dollars are going into their own portfolio companies as they're looking to continue those. They're also investing in, I'd say, more consolidated and bigger, slightly less risky opportunities. But a lot of the startup companies, novel technologies, novel work is not getting funded as easy as it has been in the past. I'd say there's still some very compelling stories that are getting funded, and you just have to be in that super exciting space, super differentiated space to really get some of those kind of investment dollars. So hopefully the situation starts improving for everybody else.
I have a couple questions about that. One about the hesitancy and then one about the optimism. Let's start with hesitancy. What is the root cause of the hesitancy? Is it just the risk? Is it the lack of ROI? What are making investors so hesitant?
That's a really good question. And I think it's just the markets in general. I don't think there's been a lot of IPOs recently, which have allowed, or exits, which have allowed the current investors to really get back some of their investment dollars and reapply those in new opportunities. I'd say there's also a lot of question marks about the future and what's going to happen to the economy. And people are a little bit more hesitant to shell out dollars like they were in the past when kind of valuations were screaming. Companies were doing really well. There was a big need for innovation kind of at the beginning of COVID when you started seeing all those hockey stick valuations. And right now, a lot of the VCs that invested when companies were at kind of high valuations are not seeing those returns. So, not being an investor, I don't want to speak for them, but that's sort of what I'm sensing.
Is there if you throw all these ingredients into the cauldron, is the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, even a concept that investors are thinking about?
I think they are in the long term. I think that it's something that potentially is going to affect everybody long term. I'd say that for small startup companies, it's a little bit far away for them to start worrying about those things. And as a small company looking for financing at the earliest of stages, we just need to bring in financing that allows us to develop our science, develop our platforms, develop our assets to a point that they could be either clinical candidates and go into the clinic or potentially even commercial assets. So for us as scientists and people running companies, management teams, we have a very clear sight of what we need to do and what we need to raise money for. It's just a matter of how do we not let a little bit of this noise that we see on the outside kind of cloud what we're doing and cloud kind of investor sentiment. So we have to come out with a compelling story, compelling assets, and really show differentiation and what the potential kind of opportunity for investing in companies like Libra will give the investors. So that's what we're trying to focus on today and do the right science, and doing the right science hopefully will lead you in the right direction.
That's right. And so the optimism, I've been hearing it too because my focus is mostly on hiring. It seems like people are more optimistic that there's going to be more hiring coming down the pike. But even though I feel this optimistic sentiment, I don't know what anyone's hanging their hat on. What in your point of view, from the fundraising and financing point of view, what are people hanging their hat on to be optimistic?
I think that there's a lot of positive economic signals going out there. I think people see that the economy is strong. They see that there's a path forward. They also see that we've been in kind of this valley of, or this trough of financing that could only start focusing on improving and getting a positive vector. So if I were to think about what keeps me going, it's the patients and developing therapeutics and hopefully a more positive financial outlook for for the fundraising kind of environment. So for me, it's just putting your head down, working hard, and trying to reach out to the right people and making the right strategic connections to hopefully get that financing or transaction accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the saying? If you do good, you'll do well. So if you put the patients first, and especially in this dementia space that we're talking about, this neurodegenerative space, I mean, if we look at our, generations that are getting older, we all have a grandma or grandpa or aunt or something that just, they lost themselves. It's like they died, but their body's still there, and it's horrible to watch. So if you do good for those patients, eventually you'll do well.
Definitely. I'd say that depending on which neurological disease you focus on. So, for example, we're focused on ALS and Parkinson's disease. There are not a lot of good disease modifying alternatives out there for patients, right? So, just having some impact in that area, having something that could slow down disease progression is going to be a monster of a commercial opportunity, right? So, like you said, if you do the right science, you come up with some impactful therapeutic alternatives for patients, things will all work out fine, right? These are very big markets. They're markets that don't have a lot of successful therapeutics within them. I'd say that some of these diseases have some symptomatic approaches, and they have some approaches that might slow down the disease slowly. And we've been seeing and hearing about novel Alzheimer's therapeutics coming on the market in the last year, year and a half. And it seems that those are making impact for patients. So I think that as we evolve those initial building block therapeutics, learn a little bit more about how to differentiate and improve them, we'll be able to do better for the patients.
One last financing question. How important is the founder's track record when investors are looking at what they're doing currently? Is there a little bias that way? Like, hey, this horse has won the last 3 races. Maybe they're going to win the Kentucky Derby now.
I think having a team that's been there, done that, a team that's been able to generate returns for investors is always going to be looking more positive than a first-time CEO, first-time founder. However, I can tell you, because I'm evidence of it, being a first-time founder and CEO, is that if you have a good, compelling scientific story, the chances are that if you tell a good story, build a good team around it, and do good work, you're going to get financing, right? It's just a matter of putting enough effort into it, reaching out to the right people, identifying the right kind of first couple of lead investors that are helping you build that syndicate. It's critical. So I wouldn't say that if you're a first time founder and you're not going to get funded. Yes, it's a little bit tougher, but there's always opportunity for compelling science.
Yeah, I like how you said that. Telling a compelling story. I think there's a lot of storytelling in this whole thing, and helping people see the vision. Let's shift gears here, because this is a leadership podcast, but I'm so interested in the financial sector because it impacts my business too. But now there's leaders and then there's people managers, and you've done both. What's your best advice for those who are directly managing people?
That's a tough question. I'd say that managing people is a little bit different than leading companies and leading opportunities. I'd say the first thing is having clear goal setting, having clear alignment with your employees, having clear lines of communication. It's also important to have kind of their next steps in mind, have an ability to mentor them, lead them to develop skills and understand what next steps are for them, because I'd say the biggest motivator for people is not going to be money. It's going to be opportunity. It's going to be fulfillment in your job. And if you're able to provide those to the people that work with you or work under you, and you're going to be a much better manager for those individuals, but you'll also be able to connect kind of those management lines in the hierarchy, right? Because on one sense, you're going to be shielding your employees from certain events that are happening at levels above them. And you're going to be able to manage them to do their best job and also manage up, right? Communicate their wins to my management. So I'd say that there's a combination of things, but communication, goal setting, alignment on what the objectives are critical.
Yeah, I love all those. Those are great insights. And one of the things you said in the pre-show conversation that we had was about great leaders are flexible. That's a sign of a good leader. And I know you have a story there. So can you explain what you mean by flexible?
There's many levels of flexibility that I could refer to. I think that being able to adjust from a fastball to a curveball is essential in baseball and it's essential in biotech, right? We're in different environments where the funding environment could be very positive or it could be more negative like it is today. And being able to adapt, being able to identify opportunities, even in the worst moments, is critical for proper leadership and management. Um, I could tell you that within my career development, being able to be flexible in my role and serve different functions at different times has been critical. When we first started Libra, we were 2 employees, so I had to wear many hats. I was wearing the hat of CEO all the way to the hat of janitor and vacuuming and sweeping and whatever needs to be done gets done. In the middle, I was CBO and CSO at times and really have to manage different roles and functions. I'd say another example that we talked about very briefly is as the company's evolving, there's different needs for the company and different needs for personnel. And going from founding CEO and taking the company and the first 4 years from identifying novel chemical matter to just about starting GLP toxicology, I had a lot of weight on my shoulders from the CEO perspective. But as the company evolved, we eventually brought in a new CEO, which has been terrific. We brought a different skill set to the table, which was very necessary for the stage of company we were at. So being able to identify that companies have different needs and I could fill different roles within the company's different stages was essential. So we could elaborate a little bit more on that, which I know you have some questions on.
Yeah, well, the thing that I take away from that is the humility. I mean, to go from a founder CEO and then say, okay, we're at a point, I want this company to succeed. What might be the best thing for the company is for me to fulfill this other function, bring someone else in as the CEO. That takes a great amount of humility. How did you handle that?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think there's also multiple sides of that story, right? As an individual, I could tell you that it was gut wrenching when someone says, we're taking that CEO role away from you. The company needs something different, but also being an equity holder in a company and identifying that companies evolve and the needs of companies are different and change. I had to do what was best for the company. I also had to do what was best for me and do best for the investors. So, as difficult as it was on a personal level, having kind of those reins taken out of my hands, I recognized that the role I played in this company was essential. And the fit I had at that point was probably a better fit than what I would play as the company evolved to its next stages. And bringing in someone with more experience on the fundraising side, transitioning companies from late stage preclinical into clinical was essential. So a different skill set would have been required for us to maximize the value of the company and take us to that next level. So it was not easy. It was soul killing at times, but realizing that if you do the right thing for the company and do the right thing for investors is best in the long run, right? We're in a really good position right now, scientifically with the company and working alongside someone with a different skill set, such as Sean's when we brought him in, has only made the company much stronger and put us in a better position to be able to partner and to raise money.
Well, I'm just keeping an eye on the clock. I can't believe a half hour's gone by so quickly. I've learned so much. You've just rich with insights from the financial side, from the career development side, and from the leadership side. So I speak for everyone listening. Thank you so much for these insights, Isaac.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation and would love to speak with you more about this.
Keep in touch. And thanks everyone for listening. But that wraps up another episode of the Pharmaverse. Thanks again for listening. We have more leadership insights to come. So please follow the podcast and we'll see you next time on the Pharmaverse.
Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Pharmaverse podcast. Make sure you subscribe below so you don't miss any leadership insights. Like and comment. I would love to hear from you. We'll see you on the next episode of Pharmaverse.